This is the Uptick Network Stock Day podcast, sponsored by InvestorsHangout.com. Penny stock news and interviews from the microcap world. Public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world. With your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, we have a very exciting guest with us. He is Chet Billingsley. He is the CEO of MNTR Capital. They trade on the OTC QB, ticker symbol MNTR. Chet, thank you and welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Everett.
Hey, give my listeners a little bit of a background of yourself and then a little bit of background of the company, and then we're going to get into the Q&A.
Well, I'm sort of an academic sort, was at West Point, then went to Harvard, got a master's degree in applied physics, and did extra work at MIT and Harvard Business School. Spent my regular career up to about $100 million in responsibility at General Electric, and then 30 years ago, in the middle of Silicon Valley, formed MNTR Capital. And the only thing we've done for the last 30 years is provide financing and some legal and accounting advisory for different companies. First, we did it privately, and then since 1994, we went public then, and we've been doing it publicly since that time. When I moved from Silicon Valley to San Diego about 17 years ago, we soon started investing in the cancer space. Because when I was in graduate school at MIT, I studied difficult to treat cancers. And we specialized at MNTR Capital here in cancer immunotherapies. You may have seen that where they train your body's own immune system to attack the cancers. And then in early 2013, the current administration said they're no longer going to reimburse these expensive cancer immunotherapies. That I don't think from a scientific viewpoint that's a good idea, but certainly it was very bad for our business because we were the creator of the Cancer Immunotherapy Index and so forth. So we got out of that space profitably, and many other companies went bankrupt. We didn't, but then the question was, what are we going to do? And during that period of time, somebody approached me from Massachusetts and said, would I consider a cancer-focused medical marijuana treatment? And my first reaction is, that's like asking a chicken to go surfing in the ocean. You've got to be kidding me. I got, more white hair than gray hair, and, how could we do this? But the scientist in me had been recommending people that are going to die, unfortunately, from cancer, that this would help them with their nausea. Instead of throwing up 30 times a day, they might only throw up once. That helped them keep a little bit of weight on to fight the disease.
Exactly.
And when tumors press against bones and organs, it blunts chronic pain. So we took a look at that, and I saw that it was a good space from a scientific viewpoint or a medical viewpoint, and that we could probably do some good by bringing some professionalism and integrity to an area that was new, and many folks in that space aren't used to contracts and normal business dealings because it was, coming out of the shadows.
Right. It no longer has that stigmatism that it did 20 years ago, correct?
Well, it doesn't have the stigmatism now that it did, certainly than it did 20 years ago during the era of this is your brain on drugs, so to speak. Right. So there's still a lot of problems with drugs like opiates, for example, where it attacks your or deadens your brain stem, causing you not to breathe. And if you take too much, you stop breathing and die. Marijuana, all it does is cause you to be sleepy, and if you take too much, you go to sleep. So it doesn't have those problems that the other drugs do. So marijuana as a an isolated entity is gaining a lot of acceptance and is being lumped together with beer, beer and alcohol, and cannabis.
Absolutely.
And then its medical advantages, like the little girls, and usually it is girls that can have their seizures attenuated by taking CBD or some other cannabis extracts, are just extraordinary. And if Sanjay Gupta says it's good, well, that's good enough for many people.
My guest today is Chet Billingsley. He is the CEO of MNTR Capital. They trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol MNTR. Chet, explain the MNTR business model and why did you guys get into the cannabis space?
Well, the mentor business model is, we're mentor capital. So we take we do two things that are related. One is for larger cannabis companies, we bring them under our public company umbrella and act as a public company incubator for them in a very economical fashion. So we get them up to speed in terms of their audits and accounting, make sure their legal structure is appropriate for the public markets. Sometimes we re-domicile them or even have to incorporate them and domicile them someplace. And when they're ready to go public, we can spin off a portion of their business to our 4,000 cannabis interested shareholders. That gives them enough active shareholders to sustain an active trading market right from the get-go. During this process, which might take a year start to finish, we often invest in those same companies, and because we're helping prepare the financials and getting to know the business and setting it up, we know them very well. For a smaller company that may not now or even ever be large enough to go public, we can bring them under wing and give the owners the advantages of the public market by allowing them to they continue to run their business. We're not operators, have never been operators for the last 30 years. So we bring them under wing, and the owners then can be valued as part of a public company, and then they can get some liquidity or sell off a portion of their ownership, but continue to maintain control of their company.
Absolutely.
And that portion can be up to 50%. So they get the best of both worlds. They get the high valuation of the public market and the control of a small private company.
I want to talk about your revenues. 2014, and correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers. 2014, you guys did around 2.1 million. In 2015, you did about 2.5 million, which is about a 20% top line growth on your revenues. What's 2016 and 2017 going to look like?
Well, we expect about the same organic growth, and then we're looking to bring on additional new projects. We're expanding into the vape sector, which is one of the fastest growing sectors in the cannabis field, and the growth there will depend upon how active our acquisitions are. But we're also wrapping up a long-standing arbitration with Bang Corporation. We gave them $1.5 million, and then they decided that they didn't want to move forward with the transaction and gave us nothing, but then decided to keep the $1.5 million. That arbitration has just completed. We'll get the results back from the panel of judges in about 40 days, and assuming that things fall on our side, which I think they will, that will free up additional capital that'll be returned to us, and that capital will be invested. And you can sort of ask, how much revenue can be acquired by investing, $1 million or more into the sector. And you can sort of compare that to the $2.5 million in revenue we had, and reasonably, without having any projections being made here at this time, you can establish that there'll be a range of upward revenue numbers in this 2016 and early 2017 coming up.
My guest today is Chet Billingsley. He is the CEO of MNTR Capital, Inc. They trade on the OTCQB, ticker symbol MNTR. Chet, what makes MNTR so different from the other companies that are in this space?
Well, I would say there's two things. One is we're not fundamentally a cannabis company. We weren't born in this space. We were born in the cancer space. So we have a regular biotech and medical focus, and we understand all the norms and the ways to run public companies for the benefit of the shareholders. This is in quite contrast, I find, to a lot of companies that have followed the blitzkrieg into the cannabis space and are born by reverse merger and then function maybe for the benefit of the insiders. One key sign of that is that we have only 18 million shares outstanding. This is 1/10 to 1/100th sometimes of the number of shares that are outstanding in some other cannabis companies. So by having a very tight control of shares, we just don't give shares away hardly ever. It doesn't dilute the investor, and the investor can have great growth without fear of it just being taken away by large share grants. Just as a note, we say this in our 10K and 10Q, my shares, just to establish this message firmly in the market, have been in a voluntary escrow for 2 years. And I put them there just so people would know that I'm not selling into the market. And actually, I haven't sold shares for about 10 years before then. I'm in it for the long haul, certainly. And if I'm the central control person and not selling shares, the investors aren't going to get hurt by buying some shares for the long run either.
My guest today is Chet Billingsley. He is the CEO of MNTR Capital, Inc. They trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol MNTR. In closing, Chet, is there anything that you would like to get out to my listeners that you and I didn't get a chance to talk about?
Yes, I would steer the listeners to, if they're looking at this cannabis space, realize that a rising tide will float all boats.
Yes.
And the current legal market is about $5 billion, and the total market, legal plus illegal, is about $50 billion. So there's great potential upside, a 10 times multiple that can be expected. But before they jump in, the one thing they should do is look at the number of shares that are outstanding in any company before they invest. And if they have 2 billion shares outstanding, it's unlikely that the investor will get a good return. If they have a more modest amount, like we have 18 million shares, then that rising tide will probably help those companies that are issuing shares in a normal fashion and not an inflated fashion.
Absolutely. Chet, thank you for coming on the show today. My guest has been Chet Billingsley. He is the CEO of MNTR Capital, Incorporated. They trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol MNTR. Chet, we're going to be checking back with you in the next 2 or 3 months and catch up with you and your company and see what's new.
Thank you, and I appreciate the time with you. Bye, Everett.